Welcome to Best of the Nest, a program produced by the television production students of Armstrong High School that takes a look at things from their point of view. I'm Miley Lorgan of AHS-TV. Last episode, our own Alex Demore took a look at what students thought of the hypothetical idea of getting lunch off campus. In today's episode, we get staff's perspective. Let's get into it.
My name's Alex Demore, and we are here with
Miss Judge.
What grade and class do you teach?
I teach 10th grade English.
How do you feel about seniors leaving campus for lunch?
I feel like it's a cool idea, but it might be hard to actually implement in order to make sure that all the seniors follow all the rules and are able to kind of keep staying in school and getting a good education.
Do you feel like there should be any consequences on if they don't follow the guidelines or the rules set with if they could leave?
Yeah, I think if they kind of don't follow the rules and maybe they're not allowed to leave for lunch anymore, maybe there's an alternate consequence that the principals come up with, something like that.
Do you think being to leave for lunch is positively or negatively impact students' learning?
If they're out for a long time, yes, time in the classroom is always best in order to kind of enhance that education. However, if they're stuck, driving still, it would be a bit of a problem.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Alex Demore, and we are here with
Janice Barnhart.
What grade and class do you teach?
I teach grades 9 through 12, Spanish 2, 3, 4, and AP.
How do you feel about letting seniors leave campus for lunch?
Well, I don't think I would be for that. I would be worried about liability, but especially worried about the safety of our students.
What consequences do you think they would face if they didn't come back on time?
Well, that would be up to our principals. There'd probably be some kind of punishment, like detention or something like that.
Do you think letting them leave for lunch would negatively or positively impact their learning?
I'm not really sure. Probably happy students learn better, but maybe their mind would be on something else that they experienced outside of school that would get their mind off of what they were supposed to be learning.
Thank you, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.
My name is Alex Demore, and we're here with
Mrs. Blows.
What grade and class do you teach?
I teach French, all of the French, and I have anything from 8th graders to 12th graders.
Do you think seniors should be allowed to leave campus for lunch?
Well, it's not that I think it's a bad idea. I remember when I was in France in high school, the seniors were allowed to go out and into the town and during their lunch break, which a lunch break for us lasts like 1 to 2 hours, and so they could go out and stuff like that, and it was no problem. So I think it's not a big deal, but I think somebody would ruin it for everyone else.
What consequences do you think they should face for not following the rules and regulations of leaving campus?
Well, I think it should be dealt with a little more severely because there's so much at stake. If someone gets hurt or if someone like they could sue the school for allowing that and stuff. So I think they'd have to be kind of tough on people who did that.
And do you think leaving for lunch could positively or negatively impact the students' learning?
I don't think it would impact the students' learning, but they only have a half an hour, so it's, I don't think it would be a big deal.
All right, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
There you have it, folks. Straight from the Hawkspeak, back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Alex. For those just joining us, I'm Jesse Ice of AHS-TV. I am joined by now Officer Mike and Mr. Swanson to talk about seniors leaving for lunch. How are you today, Mr. Swanson?
I'm doing all right, Jesse. How about yourself?
Hey, I'm not too bad. How are you today, Officer Mike?
Fine, thank you for asking.
Do you eat lunch in the cafeteria?
I do not. Teachers and staff generally don't eat in the cafeteria. However, a lot of teachers and staff do buy lunch from the cafeteria. I used to on a fairly regular basis.
But majority of the time I bring my own lunch, but yeah.
Do you feel the cafeteria gives enough variety where students would not be bored with what they eat?
I think so, especially if, from when I went to high school, for example, right? It was one thing and one thing only until I was in senior high. And then it was two things. And it was literally two things. Like you guys have two lines with two different things, right? You have like the main course and the side. But in addition to that, you have salad options. You always have like a hamburger. You always have a piece of pizza or something like that. So compared to when I went to school, it's a smorgasbord. So yeah, I think our cafeteria does a pretty good job.
I have to agree. You have, again, from when I went to school, you have a lot more selections, especially even in the junior high. The junior high has a lot of multiple selections also. That was not unheard. That was unheard of when I went to junior high. So, yeah. I mean, yes, they do give you a lot of chicken.
Yes, they do.
There's a lot of
chicken down there. Yeah, an awful lot of chicken.
You have the options, like you said. You have a hamburger option every day too, a sandwich option every day also.
Yeah. On any given day, I think you have at least 5 options. So, yeah.
Generally, how do seniors get to school in the morning?
How do seniors get to school in the morning? I think most of them drive or ride with a buddy from what I have put together over the years, having mostly seniors. There are a handful that do still ride the bus, but I think most seniors drive or ride along with somebody else.
What do you think?
I see a lot of seniors driving, but again, I can't tell. I don't have any strict data on how many seniors are actually driving and how many are taking the bus. Of course, like everybody else, you prefer to drive and take that big yellow bus.
Yeah.
Do you think there's seniors who be able to leave the school and get lunch?
Okay, so that comes to the crux of it, right? I think it's a nice idea, and I know it did happen in the past in some districts. I'm not completely certain if it happened in this district or not. I do know in this district, once upon a time, a very long time ago during finals week, seniors could come and go and just take their test. But I do know that was a common thing for schools. So do I think seniors should be able to? I think it's a nice idea to consider. But I think in just the reality of the world today, it's never going to happen. And if you look at that in a broader context, I would have to say no. Okay, I like the idea of it, but given the way that education is and the way the world is and all of that put together, there's just too much that could potentially go wrong that the school or the district could potentially be liable for. And I know an argument would be, well, parents could sign permission slips or something like that. Well, that only goes so far, you know what I mean? Like that might save you from like a criminal suit, but what about like a liability or civil suit or something like that, which is something that could be potentially brought against the district, or a kid could forge it, you know, and if it turns out it was forged, then it kind of voids the whole thing to begin with. So the idea of it's nice. I do truly think that the idea is nice, and it would be great to think that all of you kids were responsible enough to do what you need to do, and that the community and parents and everybody would support it and be reasonable about it. However, there's always going to be 1 or 2 knuckleheads that do something, and you truly do not know what the consequence or reaction would be should the unthinkable happen. And unfortunately, that's what you got to consider, is the possible minority as opposed to the more than likely good majority.
What do you think, Officer Mike?
Well, yeah, I believe the school district will run into liability. I can tell you, when I was in elementary school, now, this campus is set up so you cannot easily walk to anywhere to eat. However, when I was in elementary school, I knew classmates that were given permission to walk home at lunchtime, get lunch, and then they walk back to the school. And these kids are under 6th grade.
Right.
Back in the 70s. Do you know what I mean? However, that's very impractical even in this. So obviously you have to drive somewhere, which brings a whole another episode into going off campus to eat. And yeah, it's just a big liability. I mean, we're talking about a school district where basically, and there's nothing wrong with it, but I mean, we escort you to your car to go get items that you might have forgotten in your car to make sure nothing goes wrong. So going out to lunch would be an additional liability. Then you have to keep track. Who left for lunch? Who didn't leave for lunch? Okay, now you want to bring your friends to lunch. So you may be the driver of the car and you may have the permission slip to go, but maybe your friend doesn't. Or the 3 kids that want to go with you don't. So all these kids have to be kept track of.
Another potential thing I could see maybe coming up with that would be you went to lunch, what did you bring back with you? Or what did you not bring back with you? Or what did you do while you were at lunch? And again, I do think the vast majority of our students would be reasonable and responsible in that regard, but there's always the possibility, and unfortunately there's probably going to be the one somewhere that takes advantage of that. And this is my 21st years in this district, and when I look back over the 20 years, things that have gone away, and I don't mean Armstrong specific, I mean on like a district-wide level. Things that have gone away for a reason. You know, it's not like administration just woke up one day and said, you know what, I think we're gonna get rid of this just because, you know what I mean? It's been a reaction to something. arguably sometimes an overreaction, but regardless, a reaction. It's not that they're just making the stuff up out of the blue. And ultimately comes down to safety and liability.
I think there's another issue involved that you may have not thought of is, again, in this school district, because of where we're at and the finances in this county, we get free lunches from the government.
True, yeah.
Okay? So if we have a large group of students that are leaving campus to purchase a lunch, at one point, our legislators and the powers that be are going to say, wait a second, you have a lot of kids going off campus to buy food. Why are we giving you free lunches? Do you see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
And that's all taken, they keep track of all that sort of thing. That's why you have to take a fruit. That's why you have to take a vegetable.
Right, they have to give it to you.
They keep track of all that stuff for nutritional reasons, and it's all got to be reported back to the government.
And there is another side of that too that honestly I forgot about until you just mentioned that. We are a government agency, government funded, subsidized, however you want to think of it. We're required to provide certain nutritional requirements to you. You leave for lunch, there's no ability to do that. Now the counter argument is you pack, what's the difference between packing and leaving? But the point still remains, you have to have the option. And if you leave campus, I don't think you can say it's an option because you left campus.
If that rule was implemented, how far do you think seniors should be able to go from campus?
Well, okay, so let's say we're in a world where it could potentially actually happen. Again, like I said, I appreciate the idea. And when I was your age, I definitely would have appreciated the idea, although my school district was in a cornfield across from a pine tree farm, so there was nowhere to go. But if that were to be the case, I would think probably not more than like a 5-mile radius, something in that regards. But again, how do you prove that?
Yeah.
You know, but I would think most kids would probably go to Dairy Queen or up to West Katanning to Wendy's or something like that. And I would think that that would probably be the expectation.
How far do you think they should be able to go?
Well, logistically, you have a half-hour lunch period.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay? That's not going to change. So you're going to have to get in your car, drive somewhere, eat, and be back at the school within that half hour.
Right.
So you can't go, it would be logistically impossible to go very far.
Yeah, and even with, like having said that, there's in-service days, you know, and on in-service days, generally we're given a little flexibility with our lunches, faculty and staff. But there have been times where we had to be within 30 minutes. You know, usually they say it's 12:30, we'll see you back here between 1:15 and 1. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, give us a little flexibility. But there have been different reasons at different times where we have to stick to the 30 minutes, even though there's not students because we have meetings and other requirements during the day. And anytime there's been one of those days that I've left for lunch, I've been eating it in the next meeting because there's not really enough time to go. And I'm talking like Wendy's. I'm a Wendy's guy, I like Wendy's. You know, I like the Baconator. And I remember specifically getting a Baconator, still being a minute or two late to my next meeting and tossing it down, you know, like, hope nobody minds, and just kind of like chowing down on it.
Do you think seniors would utilize this time inappropriately?
Well, again, it goes back to what I said before. I think the vast majority of kids would be reasonably responsible with it. I mean, it's kind of like what I say to you guys when you go out and film. I'm not stupid. Everybody older than you is once your age. I know you're probably going to take a little longer than you need to. I know you're probably going to take the long way around, like da-da-da-da-da. But generally, I think you handle it well. And I think that's the case for most kids. But it doesn't change the fact that there's always the possibility, and unfortunately, there's usually the one. Or the couple, you know, that kind of do something stupid, and that's why you have to always consider the possibility. So I do think most kids would be reasonably responsible with it, you know. Now, I also think that maybe a kid wants to go home and change pants or whatever, I don't know. But then you come back and like, oh, sorry, the line at Wendy's was long. You know what I mean? Like little stuff like that, I could see being a common thing. And that would be like the kind of behavior I'd expect from kids, which is abusing it, but not necessarily in a way outside of a kid just being a kid. However, I do think there would be some kids that could potentially really abuse it. You know what I mean? Like you use the time to go do God knows what with God knows who, and then we would have literally no idea of what they're coming back having done or having in their system or whatever it might be.
What do you think about that?
I have to agree. There are a large group of students that would probably do what they're supposed to do. However, let's look at our snack bar. okay, in the morning, okay? There's large groups of students that go down there and get their morning coffee, get their morning iced tea, get their morning lemonade, okay? When I look at the line down there, maybe 1/3 of those students are actually purchasing something.
Right.
So we have the other 2/3 basically just taking advantage of a loophole and where we go down there, stand in line, and basically take advantage of a situation.
Right.
After we get our lemonade, after they get your coffee, do you go straight back to your homeroom like you're supposed to? Or you take the long way around
Right.
and decide to take a stroll down the junior high hallways and, so yeah, I think students would take advantage of leaving campus.
How do you think the school can regulate the flow of seniors coming in and out of the school?
Well, that would be the biggest problem, I think, and I think that's probably the biggest reason why it would realistically never happen. I mean, they could certainly put things in place like you need permission and forms and all that kind of stuff to do it. They could put heavy consequences on, if you're late or you abuse it or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, once you're in that car and down Buffington Avenue, there is literally no way for the school to know where you went, who you were with, and what you did. So I don't necessarily think it is something that could be regulated. And that's the biggest reason why. I mean, aside from all the obvious ones like we just discussed, the fact that even good kids will take advantage of it every once in a while, but it's just there's too many unknowns and variables. And unfortunately, we live in a day and age where as a school district and a school and as individual teachers, let alone, an entity, we are more and more responsible for you, and
Right.
we're more and more liable for you. I know more than a few years ago now, I had a fight break out. And it was in this area during a taping, and I was here with some kids, and it broke out over there. And the first question I was asked, where were you? You know what I mean? And it didn't matter that I had 3 things going on. It's because I'm the teacher. It's that period. It's my responsibility. And for you leaving campus, it's the school, the administration, the district. You are their responsibility. And nothing changes that.
How do you think they can regulate the flow of coming in?
Well, again, you're right, that would be an extra cost and work for the school district.
Yeah.
Let's face it, you'd have to come back through the office like you do anytime you leave the building, come back through the office, check in with secretaries. They have enough stuff to do as it is. let
Yes, they
alone
do.
taking a large group of kids that went out and then, of course, once you check back in or check out, when you check back in, you'll have to come back through the metal detectors
Right.
again.
What consequences do you think seniors should face if they don't come back at all or just show up late?
Well, if this were to be something that were to happen, I would think that there would be a one-strike policy, truthfully. Just like if this were to be something to happen, and for all the reasons we've been discussing, basically why it's never actually going to happen.
Right.
But say it were something that for whatever reason did happen, I do think it would probably be the most strictly enforced rule that we have, or one of the most strictly enforced rules that we have, because of that unknown and that liability and that responsibility.
What do you think?
Well, yeah, if such policy where you could leave campus and you're not back on time, yeah.
Yeah, one strike and you're out.
It should be a one-strike policy. Of course, everybody's going to come up with an excuse. There was a crash out there. I couldn't get back to campus because I was stuck in traffic. There was a big line at Wendy's or whatever.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of excuses, but, I mean, if you can't make it back to class, then, that's a privilege that we don't need to hand out. It's a privilege, not a right to
Right.
leave campus.
Do you think they implemented the rules that would stop seniors from, breaking the rules and going out longer?
Okay, so we're talking as if this were a thing that were actually happening now, right? So in an idealized world, I think you'd go and you'd have like a 3-strike or whatever like that. But in reality, in the actual reality we're in, they would have to be strict, because of that very, very nature. I mean, think about what happens if you happen to be caught leaving the building or something like that. You can't just walk out and leave. You get hit really hard for that. So it'd be kind of like the same thing as that. It wouldn't just be cutting class, it'd be leaving campus because you're responsible and you're not here to be accounted for. Therefore, the district's accountable for you and you're unaccounted for. And that's a significant thing.
Right.
That's a very significant thing.
What do you think about that?
You're right. It is. We see there's certain students in the school that are constantly late.
Right.
Okay, and what kind of they face consequences in that for that. So because but some students take those consequences seriously, and that ding they get, maybe it's lunch detention, maybe whatever, it hurts them.
Right.
Other students are still constantly late.
Being a teacher here at AHS, how do you think that affects your decision on seniors leaving?
Oh, well, again, like I said, in an idealized version, and keeping in mind trying to see it from your point of view, I get it. And like I commonly say, everyone older than you is once my age. Like, I would have loved something like that when I was a teenager. And we do, as a school, and I do in particular as an individual teacher, do feel that the older you get, the more like an adult we should treat you, and the more we should like back off a little bit and give you that room to breathe, but also guide you with consequences and stuff like that should you falter. But it doesn't really matter what I think in that regard because of the way that the world is today, the way that education is today, you know. So in an idealized world, yeah, I think it'd be great. And I think it'd be great if you say, like, you know, you get like maybe one warning and then you lose the privilege or something like that. But in reality, that's not going to work. That's not going to happen. So for me, as a teacher, I would have to say pretty much like what I just said, like, guys, I think that's a great idea, but it's never going to happen.
Being a security guard here at AHS, how do you think that affects your decision on it?
Well, I think, again, you're right. I mean, if there was such a policy, and if this policy, the strict revocation of those privileges were to come out, should you be late or whatnot, I think that would be a big deterrent, okay?
Yeah.
However, like I said, we're just talking theoretically.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean? That would be, for me, it would be a big deterrent. A lot of students would be like, oh, you mean I came in late and now I can't go to lunch anymore?
Right.
They would be shocked. They would be upset about it, probably call their parents, have mom and dad complain to the school district. It would have to be strictly enforced, yeah. But sometimes students have to learn there's consequences for their actions.
Right.
And that's one of those things, too. Like the way the question was worded to me as a teacher, that wouldn't be one of those things where if you're a couple minutes late to my class because you were off campus, I don't have wiggle room with that. You know what I mean? Whereas you might be a couple minutes late from gym or a shop class. You can tell me what's going on, and I then have my own discretion, like, that's fine, sit down, whatever. If you're coming late because you were late from lunch, that's not entirely up to me. You know, that's the larger structure at place there.
How do you think it can impact their education, seniors leaving for lunch?
Okay, so I think that, again, in an idealized world, I do think that the more ability we give you kids to try to lead you towards becoming young adults, generally speaking, the more you're going to behave that way. Not 100%, you know, and like we've been saying the whole time, there's always going to be those couple, and there's always going to be those kids that aren't necessarily bad kids, but, you know, you're kids. You think you can get away with something small, you're probably going to try to get away with it. But I do think that that's part of the whole experience, right, is to get you guys not just educationally, but also like socially. So when you consider that aspect of it, I do think it'd be a vital part, or maybe a supportive part to social education, and also having the consequences go along with that, which we're seeing this year with the new consequences for being late in the morning. You know, like you guys are talking about it a lot, you know, and it's having an effect. But it's not without merit. There's a reason behind it, right? So if you consider that, I think that in terms of itself would be a good thing. I also think from like a pure, you know, like, man, teaching's great, kids are wonderful, let them be, da-da-da kind of perspective, I do think there would be something to possibly be said about physically leaving this place during the day just to clear your head and to come back. But again, this is all like a idealized theoretical conversation, and I have to go back to just the state of the world and the way education works today. You know, like, that's not going to happen. I do think that our school does do a pretty good job within the confines of what we have, right? I mean, Seniors and some other upperclassmen get the circle tables in the lobby. You have the courtyard as a possibility. So you do have the snack shop in the morning and things like that. So you do have these little things built into the school throughout your day to kind of give you that sense of escapism or, just a break or something like that. And I do think that that's probably mentally, emotionally good for you kids.
How do you believe it could impact their learning?
Well, in theory, okay, if such a program were to go on and everything was kept track of, and in theory, it shouldn't impact your learning at all. Right. If you left for a half hour and were gone in a half hour,
right, then you're back in class when you need to be.
And you're back in class and you did what you were supposed to do and get something to eat, it should, in theory, it shouldn't affect your learning.
In theory, yeah. This is a lot of theoretical talking here.
Obviously, being late obviously would impact their learning.
And that would be a life lesson to be learned there too, because the consequences would be severe, I'm sure.
Any final remarks?
I think it's an interesting thing to consider. And whenever we start this off, I do tell you kids, I want you to talk about something that you care about or you find interesting. And I thought this was an interesting one to consider. And even though the likelihood of this actually happening is slim to none for all the reasons we talked about today, I do think it's important because if nothing else, this is kind of giving you guys a context, right, in how you think about things that happen here and the way they do. Like I said, in 20 years, every major thing that's happened, rule, like something that's gone away or rule that has been imposed, there's been a reason for it. Right. You know what I mean? It's not like anyone in the district, our principals, our school board, our superintendent, it's not like anyone's sitting up there like, I think the kids would hate this. Why don't we try that? It's been a reaction to something. Right. And unfortunately, the day and time we live in now is incredibly different from when we were kids. And we have to function within that. And truthfully, within the parameters that we have, I do truly believe that our school district and our principals in particular do try, like you guys can argue how successful you think they are or not, but I do think they do try to give you guys some wiggle room, some freedom, some moments within the confines of what we actually have. So even though this is theoretical, having the conversation, I think, was good because it gave a chance to let you and let kids understand why things sometimes are the way they are.
Until next time, I'm Jesse Ice from AHS-TV. Keep on soaring.
This is your time to engage, create, follow your passion, show your spirit, go all out, or just kick back. Here in the Oak Grove at the heart of IUP, endless opportunities await. Where do you fit in? Wherever you want. This is your time. This is your place. Get in the Grove at IUP.
Well, that's our show for this week's Best of the Nest is a production of the students enrolled in television production courses at Armstrong High School. Join us again next time for a look at some of the unique things happening in and around Armstrong High School from the students' point of view. Until then, from our nest to yours, have a great week.